Hi, I'm Tom Lu. Today I'm in the Palace of Versailles, located in 10 miles west of Paris. The Palace of Versailles is a former French royal residence. The history of Versailles goes back to 1623, when the site was initially used as a hunting lodge by Louis XIII. Then it was expanded to a palace by Louis XIV. Palace of Versailles is one of the most visited tourist attractions in the world. In 1979, it was designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Louis XIV moved his entire government and court to Versailles in 1682, a defining moment of consolidating his power and establishing the absolute monarchy. After a new program of works, Jules Hardouin-Mansart, the renowned French Baroque architect, hired by Louis XIV, replaced the terrace overlooking the grounds by the Hall of Mirrors, which became the court's main ceremonial reception room. Mansart further expanded the palace to accommodate the family, court, and the government departments, with kitchen, servants, and a stable staff. Close to 10,000 people were bustling about the palace. At the end of his reign, Louis XIV moved his bedchamber to the center of the palace. The room was the hub of the king's daily ceremonial routine of all the Versailles courtiers. Towering over other buildings, a royal chapel built by Mansart in the same scale of the palace. When King Louis XV moved to Versailles, he broke the strict etiquette and fitted out smaller apartments for more comfort and privacy. At the end of his reign, Louis XV built what was missing, a real opera house. Architect Anne-Jacques Gabriel modernized the facades closest to the tower. In 1789, the French Revolution forced the royal family, headed by Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, to leave Versailles for Paris, marked the end of the occupation of Versailles by 4 generations of the monarchs of the House of Bourbon. Mansart's most ambitious construction was a fabulous gallery lined with mirrors. By reflecting the light of the sun into the hall, they would leave no single space in shadow. The Hall of Mirrors, built between 1678 and 1684, is a grand Baroque-style gallery and one of the most emblematic rooms in the royal palace of Versailles, and offers a view of the gardens from wherever you might be standing. The 73-meter Hall of Mirrors pays tribute to the political, economic, and artistic success of France. Political successes are illustrated through the 30 painted compositions on the vaulted ceiling, which depict the glorious history of Louis XIV during the first 18 years of his reign, from 1661 to the victory over Spain, Germany, and Holland. Military and diplomatic victories and reforms with the view to reorganizing the kingdom are illustrated through the allegories from antiquity. Economic prosperity is revealed in the number and the size of the 357 mirrors, demonstrating that the new France would rival the Venetian monopoly on mirror manufacturing. At the time, mirrors were a great luxury. Artistic success is shown by the Robe de Reims pilasters topped with capitals of gilded bronze based on the new design, which was referred to as a French style. The design incorporates the national emblems, with fleur-de-lis topped by a royal sun between 2 Gallic roosters. Courtiers and visitors cross the Hall of Mirrors daily, and it also served as a place for waiting and meeting. It was used for ceremonies on rare occasions. It was also here the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, ending the First World War. The Venus before Paris, standing on the left side of the hallway and the entrance of the Palace of Versailles, is an over life-size sculpture created by the French sculptor Charles Dupaty in 1822. On the right side of the hallway, standing the Le Burger Paris sculpture, depicting Paris holding an apple in his hand. These two monumental sculptures tell the story in Greek mythology, Judgment of Paris, in which Paris ruled Venus was the prettiest goddess by awarding her an apple. Returning the favor, Venus arranged the marriage between Paris and Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, but already married to the king of Sparta. This marriage ultimately led to the Trojan War. On the first floor of the Palace of Versailles, there's a prestigious series of 7 rooms, which are parade apartments, used for hosting the sovereign's official acts. The Hercules Room, the Room of Abundance, the Venus Room, the Diana Room, the Mars Room, the Mercury Room, the Apollo Room. They are filled with lavish Italian-style decorations, much admired by the king at the time, composed of marble paneling and painted ceilings. During the day, the state apartment was open to all who wished to see the king and the royal family, passing through on their way to the chapel. During the reign of Louis XIV, evening gatherings were held here several times a week. The Hercules Room was the last room to be built by Louis XIV at the end of his reign. The Meal in the House of Simon, an oil painting by the Italian Renaissance painter Paolo Veronese, depicts a religious banquet attended by a large number of people, including Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, who anoints Christ's feet with oil in the center of the painting. The ceiling painting Apotheosis of Hercules, painted by Francois Lemon from 1733 to 1736, is one of the largest ceiling paintings in the world. This vast, impressive allegorical work, depicting no fewer than 142 persons, is considered one of the masterpieces in the world. In this painting, Hercules, the conqueror of vices and the monsters, ascends to Olympus on a chariot pulled by the geniuses of virtue. The skill of this composition, the freshness of the colors, and the technical feat that such a work represented allowed Lemon to obtain the position of first painter of the king. Exhausted, Lemon committed suicide, however, a few months later after the completion of this decoration. The Room of Abundance served as a refresh room where coffee, wines, and liquors were served on a sideboard. The ceiling painting, Abundance and Liberality, is the work of the French painter René-Antoine José in 1683. It depicts allegorical nude females, cherubs, holding a cornucopia and objects, symbolizing abundance and riches. The Venus Room constituted the main entrance to the king's state apartment, because it was at the top of the great staircase, known as the Ambassador Staircase. In this room, Venus is depicted on the ceiling as the goddess of love, associated with the planet in ancient Greece. The painting, Venus Subjugating the Gods and the Powers, painted between 1672 and 1681, is another work of René-Antoine José. The paintings decorating the arches show great men and heroes from antiquity whose actions, inspired by the goddess, often alluded more or less obviously to the deeds of Louis XIV. The decoration in the Venus room is most Baroque of all the state apartments. In ancient Greek mythology, Diana was the goddess of the hunt, the sister of Apollo, the sun god, and was also associated with the moon. The central section of the ceiling in the Diana room, painted by Gabriel Blanchard, depicts Diana watching over navigation and hunting scenes. The Mars room followed on from the two previous rooms and marked the start of the king's apartment. It was used as a guard room, making its dedication to the god of war highly appropriate. In the center of the ceiling is a painting by Claude Audran depicting Mars on a chariot pulled by wolves. Designed as the sovereign ceremonial room, the Apollo room was used as a throne room from 1682 onwards. The ceiling was dedicated to the Sun King, the arts and the peace. The symbol of the sun, adopted early on by Louis XIV, is illustrated through the image of Apollo on his chariot, surrounded by allegorical figures. The arches illustrate the king's magnificence through various examples from antiquity. The central painting on the ceiling by Charles de la Fosse depicts the sun chariot of Apollo, the king's favorite emblem, pulled by 4 horses and surrounded by the 4 seasons. Over the fireplace is the most famous portrait of Louis XIV by Hyacinthe Regal. The painter made the original portrait in 1701 upon a personal request by the king, who wanted to give it to his grandson, who had recently become King of Spain. Exceedingly pleased with the result, Louis XIV decided to keep the original for himself and commissioned copies from the artist. The copy in Versailles was made in 1702. The original painting hangs in the Louvre. The Mercury Room was the original state bedchamber when Louis XIV officially moved the court and the government to the palace in 1682. The bed is a replica of the original, commissioned by King Louis Philippe in the 19th century when he turned the palace into a museum. The ceiling was painted by Jean-Baptiste de Champagne and depicts Mercury on his chariot pulled by 2 roosters. Mercury was the patron god of trade, arts, and science, and as the god's messenger. These themes are depicted in the arches in the ceiling.